Let's dive into something that probably pushes your buttons on a daily basis. Your child talking back to you. You know what I'm talking about. You ask them to clean up their toys, and they fire back with, "Why do I have to?" You tell them it's time for bed, and they argue, "But I'm not tired." You set any kind of boundary, and suddenly you've got a tiny liar on your hands, questioning every single thing you say. I get it. It's frustrating. It can feel disrespectful. It can make you wonder where you went wrong as a parent. But here's what Donald Winnicott discovered that's going to completely change how you understand this behavior. That child who's constantly talking back to you. They're not being disrespectful. They're actually showing you something incredibly important about their development. They're demonstrating that they feel safe enough with you to be their authentic self. And believe it or not, that's actually a good thing. Now, before you think, "I've completely lost it," let me explain what Winnicott meant when he talked about children needing to feel safe enough to be difficult. Winnicott spent years observing families, and he noticed something fascinating. The children who never talked back, who never argued, who always did exactly what they were told without question, these weren't necessarily the healthiest kids. In fact, sometimes they were the ones who were struggling the most emotionally. Here's what Winnicott understood that most people miss. When a child feels truly secure in their relationship with their parent, they feel safe enough to test boundaries, to express disagreement, to show you all parts of their personality, even the parts that might be inconvenient or challenging. It's actually a sign of trust. They trust that you'll still love them, even when they're being difficult. They trust that your relationship is strong enough to handle some conflict. Think about it in your own adult relationships. With people you don't know very well or don't feel secure with, you probably put on your best behavior, right? You're polite, agreeable, careful not to rock the boat. But with the people you're closest to, your spouse, your best friend, your family, you feel comfortable being more authentic. You might disagree, you might have arguments, you might show your less polished side. That's because you trust that these relationships can handle the real you. Children do the same thing, but they don't have the emotional regulation skills that adults have. So it comes out as talking back, arguing, testing limits. Winnicott called this phenomenon the child's need to find the real you. They're not just testing the rules, they're testing the relationship. They want to know if you'll still be there, still love them, still be their safe person even when they're not being perfectly compliant. This is especially true for children who spend a lot of time in environments where they have to be well-behaved. Think about kids who go to daycare or school all day, where they have to follow rules, sit still, be quiet, share, cooperate. They're using up a lot of emotional energy being good all day long. When they get home to you, they finally feel safe, enough to let down their guard. All that pent-up energy, all those feelings they had to keep inside, it all comes tumbling out. And sometimes that looks like talking back. Winnicott had this incredible concept he called the true self and the false self. The true self is who your child really is, their authentic personality, their real thoughts and feelings. The false self is the version of themselves they present when they feel like they need to be perfect or compliant to be accepted. Now, every child develops some false self behaviors, and that's normal and even healthy. We all need to learn how to behave appropriately in different situations. The problems arise when a child feels like they can only show their false self, when they feel like their true self isn't acceptable. These are often the kids who seem perfect on the surface, but who might be struggling with anxiety, depression, or other emotional issues underneath. The child who talks back to you, they're showing you their true self. They trust you enough to let you see who they really are, even when it's messy or challenging. Now, I want to be really clear about something here. Understanding why children talk back doesn't mean you have to accept disrespectful behavior or let your child walk all over you. Winnicott wasn't suggesting that parents should have no boundaries or that children should be allowed to say whatever they want, however they want. What he was suggesting is that we need to look deeper than the surface behavior to understand what's really going on. When your child talks back, they're often trying to communicate something important. Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed and need some control over their environment. Maybe they're processing big emotions and don't have the words to express them appropriately. Maybe they're going through a developmental phase where they're learning to assert their independence. Maybe they're just tired or hungry or overstimulated. Here's what Winnicott would suggest instead of immediately shutting down the talking back. First, take a breath and remind yourself that this behavior is actually a sign of a secure attachment. Your child feels safe enough with you to express disagreement. That's good. Second, try to hear the message underneath the attitude. What is your child really trying to tell you? Let's say your 8-year-old responds to your request to set the table with, "That's not fair. Why do I always have to do everything around here?" Instead of immediately jumping to "Don't talk to me that way," you might first acknowledge what they're feeling. You could say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling frustrated about chores. Let's talk about that. But first, I still need you to set the table, and I need you to use a respectful tone when you talk to me." You're doing several important things here. You're acknowledging their feelings, which Winnicott believed was crucial for healthy development. You're maintaining your boundary about the chore and about respectful communication. And you're opening the door for a conversation about what's really bothering them. Sometimes, talking back is a child's way of asking for more information or trying to understand the reasoning behind rules. Winnicott believed that children have a natural drive to understand their world, and that includes understanding the rules and expectations that govern their lives. When your 4-year-old asks, "Why do I have to brush my teeth?" for the 100th time, they might not be trying to get out of brushing their teeth. They might genuinely want to understand the logic behind this daily requirement. In these cases, taking a moment to explain your reasoning can actually reduce the talking back. Over time, you might say, "I know it seems silly to brush your teeth every day, but here's why it's important." Give them the respect of a real explanation. Children are much more likely to cooperate when they understand the why behind the what. Other times, talking back is your child's way of asserting their developing sense of autonomy. Winnicott understood that children go through natural phases of testing independence, and this often looks like resistance to parental authority. Your 3-year-old who suddenly has an opinion about everything. Your 6-year-old who wants to negotiate every rule. Your 10-year-old who questions your decisions. They're all practicing being their own person. This can be incredibly challenging for parents, especially if you grew up in a household where children were expected to be seen and not heard. But Winnicott would remind us that raising children who become confident, independent adults requires allowing them to practice independence in age-appropriate ways, even when it's inconvenient for us. Here's a strategy that Winnicott would probably approve of. When your child talks back, instead of immediately focusing on the tone or the attitude, try to focus on the content first. Is there a legitimate concern or request buried in there? Is there something they need that they don't know how to ask for appropriately? For example, if your child says, "I hate doing homework, it's stupid, and I'm not doing it," you might respond with, "It sounds like homework is really frustrating for you right now. Can you tell me more about what's making it feel so hard?" And then we need to figure out how to get it done anyway. But let's start by understanding what's going on. You're not accepting the disrespectful language, but you're also not dismissing the underlying feelings. You're treating your child as a whole person with valid emotions, even when their expression of those emotions needs some work. Winnicott also observed that children often save their worst behavior for the people they trust most. So if your child is an angel at school but talks back to you constantly at home, that's actually a compliment, weird as it sounds. It means you've created a safe space where they can express their real feelings. The fact that they feel comfortable enough to be difficult with you means you're doing something right as a parent. This doesn't mean you have to be emotional dumping ground for your child's frustrations. But it does mean that some amount of pushback and attitude is normal and even healthy. The goal isn't to eliminate all conflict or disagreement. The goal is to teach children how to express disagreement respectfully and how to work through conflicts constructively. One thing that Winnicott emphasized was the importance of what he called the good enough parent. You don't have to handle every instance of talking back perfectly. You don't have to have the perfect response every time. Sometimes you're going to get triggered by your child's attitude and react in ways that aren't ideal. That's human, and it's okay. What matters is the overall pattern of your relationship. If most of the time you're able to stay calm, set appropriate boundaries, and respond to your child's underlying needs, then the occasional moment where you lose your cool isn't going to damage them. In fact, Winnicott believed that children actually benefit from seeing their parents as real, imperfect humans, rather than as perfect authority figures. Here's another insight from Winnicott that might help you when you're dealing with a child who talks back constantly. Sometimes this behavior escalates when children feel like they're not being heard, or when they feel powerless in other areas of their life. If your child has very little control over their daily schedule, if they're constantly being told what to do and when to do it, talking back might be their way of trying to assert some autonomy. In these cases, looking for appropriate ways to give your child more choice and control can actually reduce the talking back. Maybe they can't choose whether or not to do their homework, but they can choose where to do it or what order to do it in. Maybe they can't choose their bedtime, but they can choose which pajamas to wear or which book to read before bed. Winnicott understood that children have a fundamental need to feel like they have some agency in their own lives. When that need goes unmet, it often comes out in oppositional behavior. By proactively giving children age-appropriate choices and control, parents can often prevent a lot of power struggles before they start. It's also worth considering whether your child might be going through a particularly stressful time. Changes in routine, family stress, problems at school, developmental leaps, all of these things can increase a child's need to feel in control, which often manifests as increased arguing and talking back. During these times, it can be helpful to acknowledge what your child might be going through. You might say something like, "I've noticed you've been having a lot of big feelings lately. I wonder if starting at the new school is feeling scary sometimes. It's okay to have worried feelings, but I still need you to use respectful words when you talk to me." Remember, Winnicott's approach was always about seeing the whole child, not just the behavior. That child who's driving you crazy with their constant arguing. They're also learning to think critically, to advocate for themselves, to express their opinions. These are actually skills that will serve them well as adults. Your job isn't to crush these developing abilities. It's to help them learn to use these skills appropriately. The truth is, children who never learn to disagree respectfully, who never practice standing up for themselves in safe relationships, often struggle more as adults. They might have trouble setting boundaries, advocating for their needs, or handling conflict constructively. So in a way, letting your child practice these skills with you, even when it's annoying, is preparing them for success in their future. Relationships. So the next time your child talks back to you, take a deep breath and remember what Winnicott knew. This isn't necessarily disrespect, it's development. It's your child trusting you with their real thoughts and feelings. It's them practicing being their own person while still being in relationship with you. And while it might not always feel like it in the moment, it's actually a sign that you're creating the kind of safe, secure relationship that will serve them well throughout their entire life.